And we've been organizing on the Hill. We've created a lot of educational materials about genocide, and we contend that genocide is a medical issue. And you know, with what's happening in respect to Palestine, the healthcare workers are being targeted, healthcare facilities are being targeted, people are not having access to healthcare. These things are all healthcare issues. I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. We've had a lot of help. This was a lot of work from so many volunteers. We had volunteers that helped set up the room. Dar Al-Hurriya gave us the space to use, and we worked really closely with Miko and Jinan to get everything together. We had everyone you could see on our program. We had so many people, and we ran into a lot of snags. The print shop that we originally worked with canceled our order last minute, so that's why we're a little late today. I apologize for that. So we got a new print shop late last minute, and they printed, and so we got it right after you guys got here. Due to the content, they said, and you can review on your own. This was Vistaprint. Feel free to boycott this print shop. We did get Minutemen Press to print for us. Thank you. And thank you to Falafel Inc. They donated this wonderful meal for all of us today. And thank you to Salam Cola. They also gave us some Coke alternatives. So if you have that craving for Coke, you have a new company to go for. Yeah. And so make sure that you look at the app that we created for the program, and there's a self-paced vigil outside, so you can go and you can write your thoughts or your feelings on, there's a giant piece of paper. I invite you to do that, light a candle, and later this evening we can go out together and do a group activity. And anybody else that I forget to think of? There's so many people, so look at the program, and there's a whole list of, we have photographers and speakers. Thank you to our speakers. There are members that have gone on medical mission, and this is a great opportunity to speak with them and hear their stories, and it's the things that they have to share are unreal, and they shouldn't be, no one should be experiencing these things. But thanks again. This is really important that we spread this news, because our government isn't helping, and so we have to work together as a community to end this genocide. Thank you.
I actually want to shout out the actual volunteers for Dar Al-Hurriya, because they have been my saving grace. Right now it's just me and Miko working, so without the help of the community, we are unable to do all of this. This does not just automatically happen when I snap my fingers, no matter how much I want it to. But Amara and Abrar back here, they are great. Amara is a regular volunteer throughout the week. Abrar is her brother, which I didn't know, who actually does all of our tech stuff and is amazing. Amelia, who is doing the videography today and helped set up the speakers and the projector. Amelia just happened to walk by one day, came in to visit, and then signed up to be a volunteer. And then we have Adnan in the back. I know he doesn't want to get shouted out, but he works with Code Pink, but Adnan is always helpful. We use him for his muscles to help carry out the heavy lifting. My friend Mona came in at the last second to help out as well, which very, very grateful for. So it takes a village. Obviously, Palestine is a community cause. It's a cause that is going to need all of us together in order for it to be successful in achieving our liberation. So I'm very grateful. And then Chloe upstairs is doing our sign-in, so I appreciate Chloe as well. So props to her. So I'm going to introduce our panelists, and then we will get started with the talk. So first we have our moderator and my boss, Miko Peled. And a lot of you know Miko. He wrote a book called The General Son, as well as a book called The Injustice, which was about the Holy Land Foundation 5. Both are incredible, but he is the one who came up with the concept of this space. And we're so grateful to have this and to have his leadership. We also have Nurse Lana, who went on a medical mission to Gaza. Dr. Irfan Galaria, who also went on a medical mission to Gaza. And Dr. John Taylor, who's the co-founder of Med Global Representatives and from Doctors Against Genocide. So these will be your panelists.
Thank you, Janata. Thank you for all your work. Let's give Janata a hand as well. Thank you, and thanks for that great introduction. We have 2 mics, yeah?
Yeah, so we gotta share.
So we did all the introductions, we did all the applause. Hopefully everybody enjoyed the food and the art here on the walls. And we should get to work to start talking about what we all came here to talk about or to hear about, which is doctors' perspective on the genocide, which is unique. Genocide is it's a legal term. The crime of genocide is a well-defined crime. So usually you'll hear people from the legal field discussing it's genocide or it's not genocide, and it's a legal issue. Doctors Against Genocide have created a very interesting perspective, have brought, or I should say, are expressing a different perspective here, having been there, and they'll talk about their experience, but having gone there on medical missions to aid as humanitarians, are coming back from what they saw and saying there's a genocide going on. So that is unique, and you know, they you know, humbly probably won't agree with what I have to say now, but that is, these guys are really unsung heroes, because I've heard presentations by doctors and nurses who have been there and have come back, and it's so horrifying that it's beyond belief. And sometimes what's horrifying are not the big things, and not the explosions and the amputations, but the small things that could be cured with just, you know, very easily. And still people are dying, children are dying from things that could be cured very, very easily. And a 5-minute drive out of Gaza, east, in the Israeli settlements, you have all the medical care that you could possibly want, and some of the best healthcare facilities in the world, just minutes away by car. And they don't have access to that, and people are dying from completely curable diseases and injuries. Easily curable, I should say. So what I'd like to do, if you'll allow me, is maybe we'll just go by order, and if you could just introduce yourself briefly, and then talk about why you're here and why you're part of this organization that is defining what we're seeing as genocide, because I think that's really, really a crucial element. And maybe we'll start with you, Nurse Lana, since I know you love to talk, to speak publicly.
And he always puts me out to every event. So, yeah, my name is Lana, and actually the way I got into Gaza was through Doctors Against Genocide. Nadal had sent us all a mass text, and he was like, oh, Med Global is looking for anesthesiologists, surgeons, and OR nurses, ER nurses, and so apply if you can go. And I did, and 2.5 weeks later I was in the middle of Rafah. So it was because of Doctors Against Genocide. I went in, it was personal for me. My aunt was a victim in 1967 when they fled. They were hit, they went to a shelter, my mom's family, and they got hit by a bomb, and my 8-year-old uncle at that time died, and my aunt, who was 2, was burnt head to toe, and was taken, she was taken to Switzerland, and which part of Palestine? They're from Jerusalem, so, yeah, Jericho. They were fleeing from Jericho at that time, actually, sorry. So she was taken to Switzerland for I think, nearly a year for treatment, and back then, like, they didn't have phones, so my grandma had no idea what her status was until one day they returned her. So I feel the obligation to give back. The same way my aunt was taken care of, I want to be able to take care of anybody injured around the world. But that's what brought me there. And
What are you calling it, genocide?
so why I call it a genocide? Because it was obvious it was indiscriminate bombing, because the majority of the patients were children and women, and I mean, just innocent civilians. Everyone that I spoke with was an innocent civilian, just, fleeing their home and injured because, they were just fleeing, like on their way from running away from a casualty. So nobody was a fighter that I spoke with. I mean, they were all civilians, had jobs, or stay-at-home moms, children. I worked in a clinic for 2 days there. Med Global has a clinic in Sultan, and so for 2 days I did wound care, and the majority of those patients were children, and they were all injured from. They got a 1 minute warning. They got a 1 minute warning to evacuate their homes, and then they were bombed, and so they all ran barefoot. They all had cuts on their feet and infected wounds, and it was freezing when we were there. It was so cold when we were there. So they would, set fires to warm them up at night. And so we had a lot of kids who were burnt by the fire, and lots of shrapnel injuries that we had to debride. So, that's what I was seeing. And to me, all that indiscriminate injury and bombing and killings, and to me, that's a genocide. It's a mass casualty incident like daily.
Can the speakers make sure the mic is very close so that you
Oh, I'm
project?
sorry.
People in the back cannot hear.
You guys hear me okay?
Yes.
My name is Irfan Galeri. I'm a plastic and reconstructive surgeon. I have a practice in Northern Virginia. And I have been on several humanitarian trips all over the world, about 24. The reason why I went to Palestine and Gaza in particular is I was there in 2009 after Operation Cast Lead. I remember what the conditions were like there. I remember what the people were enduring. And I had a desire to give back and try to help in whatever capacity I could. And that's why I was fortunate to be able to have the opportunity to go. The reason why I'm here, quite frankly, is because I feel guilty. I was a witness to incredible atrocities. When I went to Gaza, I had the intention of not telling anyone. My family knew, a few close friends, and that was it. And even when I returned, I was pretty quiet about my experience. But it became very clear to me after I started digesting and thinking through what was occurring is that this was, it was not a war, what I saw. And I actually wrote an article describing my experience when I came back, trying to share with the rest of the world as best as I could what actually was happening out there. I feel like I was a witness to genocide, particularly because in my mind, there was no distinction made between civilian and military targets. I felt there's actually a deliberate, calculated attempt to punish and destroy a group of people. And I saw that just moments, as soon as we entered into Gaza, that reality really sunk in. When Lana and I were on the trip together, I've never been in a situation where, like I said, my reality has changed so suddenly. And it was just so dramatic what we were stepping into. When we were on the Egyptian side of the Rafah border, it was daylight, it was calm, there weren't many people there. As soon as we crossed into the Gaza side, it was dark, we could hear the drones, we lost electricity within a few minutes of getting there. It was like dark physically inside the buildings. It was really a disturbing situation.
My name is John Kaler, and I am a retired pediatrician, and my comments tonight will be for me as an individual. And I want to excuse myself. I want to excuse myself right now because I'm really only half here right now. When I was coming to the event, I went past a hotel where the IMF is currently functioning at, having their meeting. While I was going past there, wondering who was going to get all of this money that these fools were divvying up, I got a text from a colleague of mine in Gaza that a young woman who served as my translator, I was there in 2018, 2019, and then I've been back twice since the catastrophe has begun. This young woman is a dentist, had been displaced from Gaza City to Rafah. She served as my translator while I was there, and we've stayed in contact since then. I have 6 children, and now I have 7 with her. And I want you all to think of one thing. You've heard these stories and you're going to hear these stories. But I want you to understand something. This is you who have been displaced. All of you think of going from here to whatever the hell 26 miles south of here is in 4 hours. This is you. This is not some sub-Saharan African group that is being displaced by plenty of room. Gaza would fit inside metropolitan Detroit. That's the size of it. And it's you all who are being displaced. It's an old man like me that's being displaced. So she had been displaced from her practice in Gaza City South, living in tents like everyone else. Everyone, I agree with you completely. The second you step inside Gaza, you're hit by, I've been to a lot of bad places in my life. I've been in Haiti, I've been in Yemen, I've been in Aleppo. And so I thought, I'm a tough guy, I can handle this when I got in. And the second I stepped in, you're smacked with it. Remember, there's been no trash pickup in 1 year, no sewage pickup, no nothing. So you're smacked with the smell, the feel, the taste. That's how I want you to try to rethink about it for a second. Anyway, she was displaced back north, or she decided to go back north. And she was in Jabalia. And my person that contacted me told me they haven't seen her now in 2 days. And so it literally has half of my brain. I want to thank Doctors Against Genocide. First of all, what type of lunatic world has to have a group called Doctors Against Genocide? It's just unbelievable. Necessary, but unbelievable. So, I don't know. I know well the legal definitions of genocide, and whether this fits them or not, I'm sure it does. There is just no question there's a slaughter going on. And it's your sons and daughters, it's your granddaughters, it's your grandchildren, it's me that are being slaughtered every single day, and it doesn't get any better. And now Lebanon is happening, and the West Bank is happening, and they're all tied at the hip. Well, okay, thank you.
So actually, he was there when I was there. He was there setting up for my group, Group 1. So he was in Nasser Hospital when it was besieged. And so they had to emergently evacuate into Egypt. And that's where I met up with him. And we worked on Plan B, which was European Gaza Hospital. But he was there when that happened.
Wow. It's hard to keep talking after hearing this. I want to add another shout out here. Dr. Jim Colby, who's a founding member of Palestine House of Freedom, has been a friend for a very long time. He started working as a doctor in Gaza in 1964, I believe, and has until actually relatively recently. When was the last time you were there? 2018. 2018 was the last time Dr. Colby was there. So I've been doing this for a very long time as well.
Let me just say one thing
Please.
to teach all of you.
Yeah.
Microphones are very directional. Remember the famous singer, come on
We can't hear you.
They can't hear you.
Microphones be like this. You talk into it, not sideways.
Right.
They're very directional. Your hands should be up here.
It's a good thing there's a doctor in the house.
I was there in '64, worked with UNRWA with dehydrated children for 3 months. We lived in Gaza City, Gaza town, and every day went down by jeep to Khan Yunis, where we worked. At that time, all the buildings were only 2 stories high. It was very different. Then I went back in 2000 with Physicians for Human Rights. We did a study of the violations of Geneva Conventions. We found that the Israelis had the same problem of Bush. They didn't know how to read the Geneva Conventions. They didn't know how to read. Bush didn't know how to read and gave torture. And torture is going on routinely. So we wrote a paper, and that started the Mitchell Commission. That was in 2018 during the March of Great Return. But anyway, thank you all, but keep your microphone right here, not here.
Thank you, we shall. I think this actually speaks to the fact that, I don't know if you saw the movie upstairs, it's an excellent movie, but I think this, of course, what Dr. Jim was saying speaks to the fact that the genocide has been going on for a very long time. It did not start on October the 7th. One of the things that has impressed me as I've heard you speak, all of you speak, and Lana, you and I have spoken many times other than just the formal kind of events. One of the things that strikes me the most, like I said, even worse than the bombing, is just the it's like you're just describing, John, like the sewage, like the day-to-day stuff, which is a big component of why this is genocide. Children with sepsis. And again, a 5-10 minute drive away from there, people live like this. You wouldn't dream, an Israeli kid wouldn't dream of having an issue with an infection or dying of dehydration. And dehydrated children, why are children dehydrated in Palestine? So I want to ask you all to delve into that a little bit more in terms of like the day-to-day experience. And you did it really, really well when you and I spoke. It was really harrowing to hear just the day-to-day stuff, what it was like getting in, what you had to do in preparation of getting in before you went to Gaza, and then what you saw. And again, you described seeing a man as you were walking in the hospital corridor and that sort of stuff. I think these are really, really important aspects of what is going on, because they fill in the gaps when anybody questions whether it's a genocide or not. These are all the symptoms that make it very, very clear, or that this is definitely genocide.
So I will say, when we drove in, definitely immediately it was dark, drones. You can hear distant bombing sounds. There were tents everywhere down the shoreline of Mawasi. That's where our safe house was. We saw thousands and thousands of people like just out standing around their tents. The smell was atrocious. It smelled like diarrhea, like the worst scent of diarrhea ever. And when we went to the hospital, the first hospital we went to, this was the saddest, this haunts me. But the first hospital that we went to, we had to abandon them because it was so bad. So, okay, I'll get through this. So we went to Najat Hospital, and there were hundreds of patients that were there. It's a small 60-bed hospital with they had 300 admissions, and there were lots of people around. There was a guy in the trauma bay who was lying dead on the ground. No one realized. There were 5 patients in that room, and I looked over at him, and I looked over at Dr. Nimitz at that time, and I was like, do you see his chest rising and falling? And he said, no. And I checked his pulse. He's dead, right? And people didn't even know. I mean, it was that bad off that there was a dead body there, and people didn't even recognize that. There was another guy who was at death's door who had not been seen for 10 days. He was lying by the window. I mean, the ER is as big as this room. And he was lying right there on a mattress, and unattended for 10 days, and he had this big mass in his belly, which I thought was a tumor. And we did a bladder scan, and it turned out it was his urine backed up. So I put a Foley in him, drained him, I had 2 liters of urine drain out of him, got an IV in him, And after like 2 liters of IV fluids, he started to wake up. When I saw him, he was not responsive and he was twitching. So he was really at death's door. I mean, it was so bad off. They didn't have supplies that we needed. The OR, they only had 2 ORs, and we went to offer help, and they were like where are we gonna have bunk beds? Like, we can't have you guys in here with us. So it was so bad that we had to abandon it, and we never went back there. And they were probably the people that needed the help the most, you know what I mean? But so I live with that regret that we turned our backs on them. But that was really rough. I wanted to bring attention to this today. So I made a friend there named Lena, a nurse anesthetist, and she actually sent this with one of the medical mission members that went after me as a gift to me. So I'm wearing this in honor of her, and I wanted to just talk about her for a second, because she had been trying to get pregnant for 4 years and couldn't. Finally got pregnant September of 2023. So happiest moment of her life. And then after October happened, she miscarried. So when Israel bombed the IVF clinic, the fertility clinic, she was devastated. She was like, I guess I'll never have a kid, and was so upset by it. And recently, like 3 months ago, when EGH hospital had to evacuate, her and her husband, who's a physician at European Gaza Hospital, had to stay in a tent, and she's pregnant. So, yay, Palestinian resilience, right? So I'm very happy for her. However, I was texting her on my way over, and although this should be the happiest moment of her life, she's wishing death upon herself. So she hasn't had food in like 10 days. So yeah, she's eating rotten bread, and she said they have nasty canned food. She said it's disgusting, like I feel like we're dogs. And she said, I'm grateful though that I have multivitamins. So I've been taking my omegas and my multivitamins, but she was like, but I just rather die. Honestly, I just wish that they would just like annihilate us, like just be done with us. Like, well, I can't live like this. And this should be the happiest moment of her life. Like, this is the moment she's been waiting for. She's wanted a baby so bad, and it's a girl, and she was excited when she found out the sex, but today was a different person that I spoke with. Like, she was just done. So I just wanted to bring attention to that. And then I'm going to pass this on to you before I get too emotional.
There's a lot of stories I could potentially share. I think one of the reflections I would want to share with you to answer this question is that once I got to the hospital with the team, within about maybe 24 hours, my mindset just shifted. You know, initially, I was very excited, eager, active to help, trying to do whatever I could, and it became very clear to me and the rest of the team just really how helpless the situation was, just how overwhelmed we were with the number of patients. I was just telling someone earlier, you know, the hospital's designed, the EGH hospital is designed for 300 patients. It had 1,000 patients, 300 of whom were on the plastic surgery service. So when we showed up, there were 300 patients in the hospital that, you know, I was trying to help, and I just couldn't, right? And what also was very frustrating to me is what Miko was alluding to earlier, is just the lack of access to medical equipment. 70% to 80% of the amputations that I had to perform could have been avoided if I had the tools and the equipment that I have here in America. And so every time I was performing an amputation, that's all I could think about, you know, just the disparities that was occurring.
There are 3 things that make Gaza different than any other crisis that's happening at this moment. And that's any other crisis. That's Haiti, Sudan, all terrible crises, Venezuela. But there's 3 things that make Gaza different. I've got to get this thing in a direction here. The first is the enormity of it. Namely, as everyone has alluded to, and I will say it directly, 100% of the population is affected. 100%. There's no safe spot. There's no safe area. 100% is affected. And the colleagues, our Palestinian colleagues that my surgical colleagues worked with have been on the wall for 365 days. They've been working for 365 days with no pay. Okay, so, and their families are intense. They're intense. There's a bombing in the area. Well, guess they're worried that their family is bombed. And sometimes the dramatic stories have turned out that they are. But the enormity, so 100% is affected. Okay? The second thing is that there is a paradox with regards to aid. There's a difference between aid availability and aid accessibility. There is no shortage of available aid. I can throw a goddamn rock and hit it from inside rock. There's no shortage. This is not Sudan where you can't get the aid anywhere near. You can see it from inside. You can't get it. It's inaccessible. So there's that paradox. And then third is that there is no place to go. They say there's only two places to go. You can go to the sea or you can go up in the air. When they say your back is against the wall, in the Philadelphia corridor, it is against the wall. There are 3 cement walls that separate Egypt from Gaza. In Syria, when we were in Aleppo, people could get out. Not legally, not easily, but they could get out. When we're in the islands in Mytilene, that's where they were coming to. So you could get out. In Venezuela, you can cross into Colombia. In Sudan, you can get safely somewhere, not well, but safely somewhere. There's no place to go here. So in addition to these things, suddenly you have acronyms like wounded child, no surviving family. Nowhere has that ever been. I've written on charts. You have that, you have ecocide. So yeah, the hospitals there may be 10,000 people that are in the hospitals that are only supposed to sit 1,000, but there's 2 million people in Gaza. So I can rebuild the hospital if you open the gates and give me this. I can't, of course, if you can open the gates and give me this stuff. But what I can't do is pick up all of the toxins that are in the exploded and unexploded bombs that are now carpeted Gaza.
Yep.
So there's ecocide. There's domicide. 60 to 80% of the livable habitats have been destroyed. 60 to 80%. The scholasticide. There's no university left in Gaza. So the bombing can stop tomorrow and you're not going back to the 3rd year of medical school. It just doesn't exist. Your professors are killed. They're in jail. No engineers, no nurses, no social workers, no doctors. No. And the bombing can stop tomorrow, and that's not going to happen. So scholasticide, dormicide, I don't know what the hell you call roads destroyed. 70% of the active roads are destroyed. So whatever you call it. What would you call it?
Roticide.
Roticide. But that's what makes this different, and that's what puts this into any category above murder. That's broader than that. Because what's going to happen, and I'm an old man and won't see the end of any of this, I understand that. But what's going to happen is that something's going to shift, the bombing's going to stop, the gates are going to be open, and the Israelis are going to be praised as being humanitarians. It's absolute lunacy.
I hope people are, using their phones to post and share things, because this stuff is priceless. And these people sitting here on these chairs are priceless. And so this is. I've been dealing with Palestine for a long time, and I know Palestine well. This is unique. This is a unique opportunity to hear these experiences. This is better than any political speech anybody could give. So I hope those of you that have your phones, you share and post what is being said here. One of the things that I've heard many years ago, Matt, you all know Mats Gilbert, I think, right? You know who Mats Gilbert is. Mats Gilbert is a Norwegian doctor that's been working in Gaza also for decades, and before that he was in Lebanon, and now he's in Lebanon again. He's a saint, and he's a good friend of mine. And so I've been hearing similar stories for many years from him, describing what it's like to be in the operating room with no light and using your phone, and you know, the drones and the bombing and the screaming. And in fact, I think you guys know this. I may have shared it with you. In the presentation that he gives, he has like a moment where all he does is he plays the sounds of what it's like in the OR, and that's just, you know, you don't. It's beyond belief. I'm going to ask just one more, kind of give one more question here, and I'm sure there's people in the audience who would appreciate asking the question, so we'll open that up for that. So, what is happening now? I mean, are you in communication with the people that you met and worked with? I mean, you just told this horrific story about what is happening now. Are you able to go back if you want to go back? What are the limitations? What are the restrictions? If you can share some of that so we know where things are.
So sadly, I'm not allowed back because I am Palestinian. So I'm not allowed back in. I know about 8 NGOs recently got banned from going in. The situation up in the north is terrible. I'm sure you guys have heard about the 15-foot hole that was dug that they've like buried people alive in. In the south, where the people I'm in communication with, they said they're hungry now. It's been 10 days, no food, and so they're eating the scraps that they've had, and literally eating molded bread to survive. That's the newest bit of information that I got today.
I can add a little. So, from the physician's perspective, as you all can imagine and know, there's been a significant limitation about the number of doctors who can now enter Gaza. We were fortunate to go when the Rafah border was open. It's pretty well, it was a known secret back then that was one of the few opportunities doctors had to bring specialty equipment in. No contraband. For example, I brought boxes of local anesthesia pain medication. That was the only local anesthesia that the entire hospital had for 1,000 patients, and that was used up within about 5 to 6 days that I was there. Since the Rafah border has been shut down, there have been significant limitations. So specifically, when doctors go now, they are required to go for at least a month. Very few groups can go for 2 weeks. They have to go for a month. They're only allowed to take 1 suitcase with them. They're not allowed to take more than, I think, $3,000. They cannot take any medical equipment with them. There have been instances where, for example, I've heard stories like one doctor had asthma and he had 2 inhalers with him, and they took 1 inhaler away from him, and they said that was unnecessary, right? So pretty incredible stories. You know, there's one story that I just want to share because for me this was very impactful. It was about a doctor who was returning back from Gaza. He went in through the Rafah border. He was leaving through the Israeli border. As he was leaving, the Palestinian, the bus stopped. The Palestinian driver was waiting for him to make sure that he could cross. When he was exiting, he describes walking to a shed, and in that shed there was a microphone and a camera, and it was a female Israeli soldier, and she told him, "Take out everything in your bag." So he did that. She then told him, "Separate your food and water." And so he did that. And then she said, "Throw this away in the garbage." So he instinctively took the few 6 or 7 bars that he had, bottle of water or so, and walked out and handed it to the Palestinian driver of the bus and came back. And he was reprimanded for that. He was told by the Israeli soldier, "I didn't ask you to give that food and water to the Palestinian. I have told you to throw it away. I know exactly what you took out there. Go back there, get it from him, and put that food and water in the garbage, or we're not going to let you exit." And to me, that is, when you ask early on, why is this a genocide? I mean, there's no death involved, but it tells me just how calculated, how inhumane, how insensitive and sincere, this occupying government really is.
those stories are just, they're devastating. The last time I was back going in May, you go in a caravan. You leave Cairo, it's 10, 12 hours. You go in a caravan of 6 or 7 cars with the WHO who's going to usher you through. That's how you used to get in. And so now no phones, please. When I was going in May, I had 5 passports for families inside. We had 30 bags, and that was all appropriate. But I had 4 personal bags for families. This is my 4th time back in, and I know folks, so that I was bringing these in for families. All stuffed, by the way, with the essentials, cigarettes and chocolate. All right. And Gaza is a cash economy, literally. And there is no cash, literally. Meaning, you can have, 200,000 shekels in your bank account, and it just doesn't exist. There were 2, before Rafah was invaded, there were 2 ATMs that you get to get X out, and oh, by the way, you got X out, you paid 10% of X to the person that was guarding the entrance to the ATM. But now there's no money. So now to get money in, you have to bring it in. And when you bring it in and exchange it, there's a 20% off the top of it. But I had enough money to pay our staff. And we were turned away at the Rafah gate. That was the day the IDF took over. And the rules didn't change to what they talked about. That is probably one of the biggest hurts I have, because every one of those people that had the passport coming in were on the list to get out. And you can't get out without paperwork. So the cigarettes and the chocolate probably were more important to them, but the passports were just devastating to not be able to get to them. And I agree, by the way, it's the level of demeaning meanness that is what stands out to you every single solitary day. So to scale this, on 7 October, there was estimated to be 50,000 women pregnant. This is 1 year later, so something has happened to every one of those pregnancies. The secondary part of that is absolutely no one knows the data. So nobody knows what the outcomes have been, nobody knows how many of those went to term, and nobody knows how many maternal deaths have gone. 0. No, there is no data collected. There is no data collected.
I want to press on you on one thing that you've said, that I've heard you say, and that was you were treating somebody and then you were ready to give discharge orders, discharge instructions.
Oh yeah, I didn't know what to do. This was my very first medical mission trip, and I'm so used to saying the same spiel. Like, I worked in the ER 7 years and 9 years in the urgent care setting before that, and I just know what to say for every discharge instruction. And when I was there, I was like, whoa, like how do I tell them to keep their wound clean, with clean water, soap, mild soap. They didn't have soap, they didn't have water. How to apply antibiotic ointments, they didn't have access to that. So I was like, wow, how do I tailor my discharge instructions? Like, I didn't think about this before coming in. So it was tough. I was like, just do the best you can. If you have a sock, throw it over your foot. It was really hard. That was probably one of my biggest challenges there.
Let me echo that, because I'm a general pediatrician. I practiced for 40 years. I helped open up our primary health center in Rafah. We saw 400 patients a day, and I had to run. Another colleague and I saw pediatrics, and when I sat down, 100% of them were sick. These kids mostly under 2, mostly had bronchiolitis and lower respiratory disease, but 100% of them had diarrheal illness. And so, I'm figuring, I've done this for 40 years. I got this one. I'm going to shine on this one. But to reflect what Lana said, there's no clean water. It was winter. They were living in a tent. You couldn't leave the butt exposed. There was no extra Pampers. There was nothing. 0. And yet, these kids were unbelievably well taken care of. Anyone that I said to come back, the good news of being my age is that I trained at a time when we didn't have inhalers and stuff like that, so I'm perfectly comfortable with the natural history bronchiolitis, so I had no problem with that. And anybody I told to come back, and this was chaos, by the way, the clinic was the size of this room, and if you want the worst job in the world, 500 patients a day, everyone was registered by hand. So go ahead and do that registration. But everybody I told to come back, and it's no Uber to come back. We were living in tents far away, and so it's exactly, I would say, okay, well, I need to see you back in 48 hours. Well, what the 48 hours? These poor folks are living 5 kilometers away under fire. So it was exactly that feeling. I thought I knew what I was doing, and it wasn't much different than what they would have done, except that the entire infrastructure was ripped out from under us.
Hey, I'm Alice Sucre, I'm a pulmonologist. I know a lot of you guys. I'm in Doctors Against Genocide. I just wanted to comment a bit about what you're talking about with the babies, just from personal experience. I have not been to Gaza. My husband is from Gaza. We've lost almost 200 in his family now. And I spent some time on Capitol Hill with these guys. It was an honor. But in our family in particular, we had in January a cousin. He was married, his wife was pregnant. They had 8 children. She was pregnant with her 9th. They were going in 2 cars to escape the north, and the cars were bombed on a quote-unquote safe route. The husband and all 8 children were killed. His wife, my husband's cousin's wife, survived. She was 8 months pregnant. She gave birth in a tent in Rafah, and the baby, this was in January, the baby froze to death. So preventable, obviously. And we also have family who had twins who, fortunately, they are still alive, but we were struggling to figure out what we were gonna do to find formula because pregnant women's breast milk supplies have dried up. So you can imagine a baby that's too young to be able to take anything safely besides breast milk or formula. They can't take solids, they can't take softs, they can't do anything of that nature, and they're dying because their mother can't feed them. So I don't know if any of the women in here have ever had an episode where, I was traveling once, and I became very dehydrated from hiking. I had a 6-week-old, my daughter Lana, right there. And I became extremely dehydrated, and I was in the middle of the woods with a baby and had no formula, no ability to get formula, and it was absolutely terrifying. What am I gonna do? And and it quickly resolved itself within a few hours. But I imagine, I don't have the data, as you said, there is no data, but you can take that one story, okay, 2 stories, and you can extrapolate it across thousands. And you can imagine that's just one small tragedy that I'm sure has been repeated countless times.
And to follow up on that, that's one terrible story. But to follow up on it, it's only now, remember when you hear these statistics about numbers of percentages of kids malnourished, those are kids 5 months to 5 years. That's the only ones you get, you measure those, right? No one mentions pregnant women. No one mentions the elderly. No one mentions the effects, the perinatal effects on the newborn baby. So stats you hear are their stats, and take them with the proverbial grain of salt. But the people that are really being affected, and all of those kids, even if they get their bread, they're still malnourished. They're not getting micronutrients. They're not getting any other vitamins. And so those will all, irrespective of how this ends up, come back and take a look in 10 years. And watch attention span, watch any epigenetic effects. Those are war-related and will never be counted as such, ever.
And the last thing I'll just say in terms of you were asking physicians, why do they know it's a genocide? So I know it's a genocide because of the countless numbers of family that have been killed. But specifically, there was 3 aunts in the family in the north of Gaza. They were still in a home, in an apartment. Had been moved several times. They were in their 70s. There were no children, no men, nothing that they could be accused of housing or any sort of ridiculousness or anything like that. The IOF came at 4:30 in the morning. There was one sister who was disabled in a wheelchair, 2 sisters who were mobile. They came to the door at 4:30 in the morning and they gunned 2 of the sisters down. They killed them on site. The 3rd sister, they went into the home, they shot her in the arm. She was able to survive. She called the family. Family tried to get, evacuate her out of the home. The Israelis refused. So she bled to death over the course of 3 days. So we have 3 days worth of voice recordings of our family member dying, okay? It gets even, if you can imagine, more depraved, okay? So she passed away. The family knew she passed away because she wasn't speaking any longer on the phone. They contacted the IOF. They asked them, can we please retrieve our loved one's body? She was in that house for 3 days, by the way, with her 2 dead sisters before she passed away. They refused to let them go retrieve the bodies. They burned the house down. So what was buried were their bones and a metal wheelchair. That was what was left. So if anybody ever asks you guys about intent, you share that story, okay?
Remember this ridiculous wharf that was built at the time when they could not get machinery in to clear the rubble to pick up the bodies. This is the same machinery that filled the sea. So that wharf, let alone was it a ridiculous thought, it was built on the bones of Palestinians. There is just no question about that. And then after whatever happened, they took the goddamn thing down.
Just to follow up, the comment that was the comment about intent. I'm not sure if everybody appreciates why that's important, because for the crime of genocide to qualify, you need to demonstrate intent. So if you bomb a building once and you kill civilians, that's not intent, that could be an accident. So the intent portion here, I don't think there's any question about that. I wanted to ask also, I've heard that there's polio and cholera, and I just want to remind all of us, we're talking about really a concentration camp within a fully developed country. You wouldn't dream of having polio or cholera on the outside of the concentration camp of Gaza. All right, you wouldn't dream of it. And now what I've seen in the Israeli press is that Israeli soldiers are being given polio vaccines before they enter. So do you have any comments on that?
Well, let me say, luckily there's been no cholera in Gaza, to the best of my knowledge.
They don't have the means to test it.
Well, but if there was cholera, there would be no question about it. Meaning it would kill. When I was in Yemen and Haiti for cholera outbreaks, and those are not things that you miss. Which believe me, I'm not defending that. Polio, there was at least one paralytic case, and if it was one paralytic case, there's hundreds of others.
Paralytic, what does that mean?
Meaning they were paralyzed from the waist down. Polio is a highly infectious disease that has low morbidity associated with it. And when it does, it's 3 to 5%. But if there's one paralytic case, there's plenty of more around. There's plenty more kids around, no matter telling who's intense. To the point where the WHO came up with this cosplay of a immunization program where they supposedly gave out 650,000 immunizations in 2 weeks and got a big pat on the back about it. Whether it happened, whether the numbers in the books were cooked or not is up for grabs. Second part of that is supposed to be happening now, and I seriously doubt whether it's happening now. And it's got no play whatsoever. So there was polio, and you're 100% correct. These are all related to the infrastructure destruction. Doesn't matter how nice your hospital is, if you got no infrastructure, no public health related activities, this is what's going to happen.
There's one toilet per,
Oh.
how many? 4,000 people? One toilet?
The media said they put the second polio vaccine on hold.
Yeah, right. That's how
yeah.
reported it was. That's how reported
So
it was.
I think the last I heard was that there was one toilet per 4,000 people. And it's like, it's not a real toilet. They dig in the sand, like a little hole in the sand.
Any other questions, please?
Thank you so much for your moral courage and bravery, and we are all indebted to you. Will you be presenting your findings at any medical conventions? Will you be speaking at the American Medical Association or any big forums with other medical doctors? And have you submitted any articles to the medical journals?
I presented at the American Academy of Pediatrics. 4 colleagues and I presented at the American Academy of Pediatrics 4 weeks ago. We presented this to 10,000 people. It gets blocked. The AMA is, keep my comments about them down. American Academy of Pediatrics. American Academy of Pediatrics. We could not get a ceasefire memorandum through. American Public Health Association. 12 hours to get some vanilla war is bad memo released. The organizations are filled with lunatics. I was asked, and I know a lot of colleagues here, and I give them credit for it because I don't have the stomach to do it, which is go talk to the representatives. 6 months into this goddamn thing, if this was the first they heard about it, then either our spy system sucks as bad as it does, or they're not paying attention to it. 6 months into this, I give our colleagues here credit for just yelling their ass down. I mean, it can't be an issue of data. It just can't be. And if it is, they need to get their heads out of you-know-where and pay attention to every single solitary day anywhere. So the answer is I did 4 weeks ago.
So if I could just add to that, there have been several attempts that have been made by physicians and nurses who've gone to Gaza to try to publish and present. They're being blocked, essentially. A lot of the journals, a lot of the conferences that you've heard of, they're rejecting them and not really providing adequate explanations as to why. And there have been editorials that we've written to medical journals trying to document just the conditions that the physicians are forced to work in, or the lack of access to medical care, and those are being blocked as well. So there are efforts that are undergoing to try to make this more, try to present this information to the medical community, but it just hasn't been successful.
So I've given my testimony to the ICC. I'm sure, have you too? Yeah. I think we all have given our testimonies to the ICC, but I'm working on an article. We'll see if it can get published. But recently, and I'm not going to say where I work, but I did ask my job if I could put in apolitical, just a little script in our newsletter, hospital newsletter, something completely apolitical, but about the situation. And they replied with, we commend you for going and whatnot, but so many other people have gone on mission trips, and we just don't have the space to put your story in. And I was like, yeah, but how many of them are asking to write about it? Like, whatever. So, we're trying.
I'll add one thing to that, to show you how bad the world is. I don't have to tell anybody in this room that this is a bad world. When we were in Cairo in May, a colleague and I went in. We were going to go early in, and then the team was going to follow. But we couldn't for certain reasons, very, very appropriate. So we were in Cairo, and we were asked to go see, by an organization, we were asked to go see a child with a significant orthopedic injury who was in one of the local hospitals. A child who had gotten out of Gaza was in Cairo. When you hear this stuff and they're in the hospitals, they don't get out of that. I mean, they don't go from the hospital they're either stuck in the hospital, or they go to a hotel that is essentially under guard. But this kid was still in the hospital. I've been there for 4 weeks. But a senator from the United States was willing to get the kid to Oregon to care for it, because the doctors were there and were very willing to take care of the kid. And so my colleague, when it was decided that he probably wasn't going to get in, decided that he would usher the kid back to the States, kid and his mother. So they got back to the States, and we said, well, they're going to go in. They literally took the kid, appropriately flew the kid to Oregon and didn't do the least bit of publicity when the kid got into the airport to the hospital. Now, could you imagine if this was any other child? They would still be celebrating this kid's coming over. The senator would still be patting himself on the back. But there was nothing whatsoever. And it tells you just how bad, the word about blowback. Blowback from helping a kid's niece? The hell blowback you gonna get? But that was that. And I was thinking about that when you were mentioning it. That's how bad. That's how much control is over our representatives now.
So also, so we did a New York Times piece. I don't know if you guys heard about that. The 65 doctors who, yeah. So I don't know. That was a blessing and a curse because I've noticed that the narrative has changed. Now the New York Times has been posting more about the issue. However, after that went pretty viral, they put the ban on the NGOs. So I don't know if that's why. I don't know, because now they know that we're the eyewitnesses, we're the journalists. You don't think so? Okay.
Which is good.
Hi. So looking forward, my questions I'm going to be frank about is there a contingent within sort of the Israeli medical community which is effectively the opposite, as in doctors for genocide? And going forward, are there chances that not only are they going to be maybe trying to hinder your work in terms of publications, but come up with publications the other way around, in case there's an epidemic or a contagion in Gaza, that it now makes medical sense to keep it locked away, not let anyone out, and almost treat it like a modern day Valley of the Lepers, something like that sort of scenario, where there's now a medical justification, which like Likud and other obviously Israeli personnel can draw upon as science-based, and hey, I know it was a humanitarian crisis then, you didn't call it a genocide, you can call it whatever you want, but now really letting that out would be disastrous for everyone and irresponsible. Is there that sort of contingent forming? I mean, as you guys are Doctors Against Genocide, I would think that has that been in discussion, trying to see who these doctors are, what they're doing. Do they have any sort of influence in the American Medical Association? Thank you.
There already is arguments against. So Lana mentioned this. The problem is when you come up with a very specific, there's always the counter specific, right? So if you say there's X, there'll be 10 people willing to say it's not X. And in the same way so in this article in the New York Times, part of what it was ballistics, pictures of forensic pictures of bullets and stuff. And the question was, did they come from here or there or somewhere else? Well, there's already been a ton of publications trying to speak against that. Same way with the malnutrition stuff. As soon as you say famine is a technical term that has 3 components to it. As soon as you say famine, then you're going to get a whole bunch of people that are going to argue against the terms, and that's already happening. That's absolutely already happening. There was a recent article published in the Journal of American, in JAMA. There was a recent article published that essentially made the case that, let alone was there's enough protein going in, that the Gazans were getting about 3,200 calories a day. So I mean, there should be an obesity problem and a starvation problem. So your point is exactly right, and it is happening. And the more specific you get, the more specific the counter gets. I think they want the Palestinians gone. So the last thing they're going to do is come up with some way to freeze it over. So I don't know. To answer your question, I don't know. I don't think so.
I was going to say, remember I made a video with Medea, Code Pink with Medea. Do you remember the video I made very early on talking about the mosquitoes being vectors and how we're a selfish society, so we only care if it's going to affect us here, right? So I was saying everyone should be concerned because whatever diseases are brewing there, these mosquitoes are vectors and they will spread it. But nobody's ever, not that I've heard of at least, have you heard of them saying that we're putting them in this mousetrap of Gaza because we don't want disease to spread?
No, he's saying that might happen.
I thought he was asking if they are saying that that's why they're trapping them in. Okay.
Yeah, just like the other questions, thank you so much for your work, and I'm glad to hear that you're getting the message out. I guess, we've watched for years Israel hide the message, bury the message, and prior to October 7th, I knew several Palestinians had issues with getting cancer treatment or getting access to healthcare before all of this. It was already blocked and limited, and I'm sure now it's just impossible. But I guess just as far as carrying the story forward, linking those two things together, the pre and post, just denial of medical care and getting that message out, I don't know if it's even possible given what you're talking about. Your thoughts?
I will tell you that as of 8 October, anybody who was getting cancer care or renal care or this care or that care in East Jerusalem, Amman, Cairo, or anywhere didn't get it. Hard stop. Boom. Some of it's loosened up now, there's been a few out, but it's a tenth of what needs to go out. I don't know how else to get the word out. I mean, the word is out. How to get these lunatics to listen is a different story.
How to get action on that.
Yeah, the word is out. This is not a deficiency in information. We know that people who need dialysis 5 days a week, at the maximum, they're getting into 2 days a week. That we know that everyone. I mean, so I agree with you completely. I mean, it's unbelievably frustrating. It was frustrating before. Hours worth of travel to get your appointment, but they would get it. They would put up with that shit just to get it. It's hard stop, nothing. So death is that.
Yeah, that just, sorry, one more point, just that in combination with the assassination of so many journalists prior to this and during this. I mean, if you combine those two things together, it's just genocide.
Gigi Olayumi, I'm a professor of medicine at Georgetown, and recently from GW, and the clinical arm of Georgetown is MedStar, and on October 8th last year, all right, I just don't feel great, thank you. On October 8th, the CEO that oversees 30,000 employees sent out an email saying, condemning the events in Hamas, and also saying that they would be sending from MedStar physicians and resources and so forth to Israel. Of course, I sent an email back and I said, I'm sure it was not your intention to traumatize other people. But the point is that there are different ways, small and large, that we can impact. To me, that was traumatizing the people who are families or who are people that care as human beings about what was going on. But I did want to kind of pivot and mention the issue of sort of environmental racism, because if we're going to shift to get people's attention, nobody ever talks about the cost of war in terms of our environment. People are wondering why there's so much cancer. Well, in the Iraq War, our government, the US government, used depleted uranium tips. Where the hell do people think that uranium, which has a half-life of 700 years, is going to go to? You can see when they're bombing that they're using white phosphorus because of the way it flashes. You can see the nitrogen. So even from a self-interest standpoint, to begin to say, look, you don't give a shit about these people, you don't see them as human, okay, but you know what? This is how it's boomeranging back. And so I think as we get into the version 2.0 or 3.0 or whatever version we're at right now, and I can't agree with you more. I mean, this whole thing about dialysis and ambulances, that's been going on for decades. I mean, that's just the way that it is, stopping them. But I think that the argument really needs to be made, and as somebody who is of a particular generation, to remind our colleagues where they stood during AIDS, where they stood during South Africa, where they stand on the current genocidal apartheid system for African Americans. I mean, let's be real. If anybody's paying attention to what happens to African Americans, it is an apartheid system. So I think that you know, in sort of the nuance of it all, that we have to bring these very important other components. But thank you for your courage and your work.
Just to add on to that, the phthalates that are in the bombs that are being dropped are at the minimum, thyrotoxic. And they're thyrotoxic to the pregnant women that are carrying their babies now. And so the other thing that that has stopped, obviously, is any testing for congenital hypothyroidism, which is going to come in a wave after these phthalates are there. Because when I said there's 60 to 80% of the housing stock destroyed, I don't mean a bulldozer ran over that. They've been bombed 5 and 7 meters into the ground. So this stuff isn't just sitting there and they're going to scoop it up and send it to Amman. This is deep down into the agrarian base. It's into the water base. This isn't going away. So I'm not sure if Jared Kushner is really getting a good deal on his seafront property. But this is there, and it's in the environment and will stay there, in addition to what's in the sea and what's in the air.
I would also add that let's not forget the example of Iraq, which had the #1 best health literacy, best outcomes in the region, right? And how many? 100,000 children died of leukemia? Yeah. So I think it's important to bring that back for those people that were late into being anti-war for Iraq, just to remind them and to really ask, but seriously ask, which side of this genocide are you on? Because guess what? Their kids and their grandkids will remember.
Yeah, which is what we need to do, because we are preaching to the choir, and I feel like we're stuck in our social bubble of like-minded people, and we need to get this word spread beyond that. So we need to normalize these conversations at work, which is why I was trying to get it in our newsletter in the hospital. So in the middle of surgery, I'll bring it up, like I'll just talk about it, and then I'll hear a couple of huffs and puffs here and there, but they listen, and at least they're hearing, the truth. An eyewitness testimony to it. So we just have to do it. I mean, it's not political, it's beyond political, it's a humanitarian crisis. So normalize these conversations in the workplace. Let people who are not in our like-minded social bubble hear about it. Oh, Dr. Galeria, I'll never forget. Tell them what that scrub tech told you when you were talking about your experience there. Like, there's people who don't know.
I try to talk to my patients, my staff, about the Gaza experience, because one of the things that I've realized is that, as you guys all do too, is that one of the biggest problems is the dehumanization of the Palestinian people. And so a week or so after I came back, I was still kind of in shock. I was in the operating room, and just the drastic dichotomy, the difference between what I was experiencing in Gaza and what I experienced in the US was hitting me. And so I told everyone in the operating room, I said, hey, I just came back from a medical trip. I was in Gaza. I said, I was in Gaza. And they said, oh, where is that? I said, it's in the Middle East on the Mediterranean. And they said, oh my God, what resort were you staying at? How was your experience? And it was very surprising to me still, even being a year out, just how little people really know. I mean, for us, it's something on top of our mind. For a lot of people, it's really an afterthought. So I think whatever effort we can play in spreading that message, I think it still is very valuable.
Are they of European descent? Just curious.
Well, we could be here, and maybe we even should be here all night talking, but it is getting late, and yeah, okay. So I just want to personally. We still have a vigil that we're going to go out and do, and I think now we know even better why we need to do this vigil. But I know Marie's going to wrap up.
Could I say one thing?
Oh, please.
This is important. There's been a lot of discussion about resilience and stuff like that, and resilience has become a term that's actually overused. What we're seeing our colleagues and our loved ones in Gaza do is resistance. Love is resistance. Living is resistance. We need to support that resistance. That's the ally we need to be.
So I personally want to thank the three of you for, there's no way to thank you for the work that you do, but thank you for being here tonight and sharing these very difficult experiences, and thank you all for being here and participating in this event.